Today I'm talking with Marianna Farag, and she's from Marianna's Kitchen in Nana's Kitchen, right? Or is it
Well,
Marianna's Kitchen?
Marianna's Kitchen. Nana's Kitchen is before the official thing. People
Aha,
would have known me from before the kitchen as Nana's Kitchen.
got it. So
Mhm.
she is the owner and creator of Marianna's Kitchen in Kingston, Jamaica. And I'm going to let Marianna talk with us a little bit about her journey to Kingston and creating or building a restaurant in that space. She opened 2 years ago, and what brought her there and how things have been going so far. Go ahead, Marianna.
Hey, well, thank you, Lisa, for thinking about me for this interview. And like I told you, I really appreciate the work that you do, and it's just of such high quality. So that's why I accepted immediately when I saw your email. So yes, I'm not from here. So right now I'm in Kingston, Jamaica. I'm actually in the restaurant itself, which is in Marketplace. And I came to Jamaica it's almost been 6 years now, but I had visited from before. And I was working in the US at the time. So my background, so I'm half Egyptian, half Syrian with French citizenship. I'm a first generation Middle Eastern. So which means that my parents, I would have been the first in the family to be raised and born outside of my parents' culture in a nutshell. So that was an interesting childhood where, you kind of have a foot into different cultures. So at home, it's a Middle Eastern culture, and then out there in the world and at school, it's a very westernized culture. And you're trying to find your identity in the middle of two different things.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's my background. And I had moved around. I had lived in different places in Europe. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, I got a job offer in the US. And I did that. And it was a big change from having working in France, where the work culture is different from American culture. Like you take time for lunch, you have more vacation time. When I got to the US, it's just work. And my vacation time shrunk to like nothing. And then going back home to visit my family who were in France was always difficult because you lose one day, you lose 2 days, basically just jet lag and time zones and everything. So I told myself, like, I'm not going to be able to go to Europe as often as I'd like to. So I'm going to have to find something close by, something that's like 3 or 4 hours away by flight. Mm-hmm. And I took a map out and I kind of drew like a zone that would fit that criteria. So it'd have to fly out of like JFK or Newark, our airport, and I'd have to be there in 3 hours or 3.5 hours. So obviously the Caribbean was like a part of that, they met the criteria. And I closed my eyes and just pointed my fingers, and literally it landed on Jamaica. Like that's literally what happened.
So wait, you were doing this in order to find a place for what?
Just for my whenever I have time off, I like to travel and discover new places. Mm-hmm. So instead of wasting so much time going like halfway around the world, I just wanted something closer. Got it. So for my vacation, basically. Mm-hmm. So yes, I closed my eyes, pointed my fingers. It landed on Jamaica. Jamaica had never been on my radar whatsoever. Like I'm an India and Mexico girl. I'm not like, those were the places I really wanted to go to, India and Mexico and all of that. So Jamaica was far, 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 like very far from anything I had wanted to visit. But I said, I'm like, you know what? Like, let's try this out. So at the time, couch surfing was gaining popularity. It's like the predecessor of Airbnb. Yeah. And I had been using it for other travels. So I went on couch surfing, I booked my ticket, and I started looking for places to stay in Kingston. And I found a really, really, really wonderful couple that I still bump into every now and then. They live in Corville Gardens, mm-hmm. which is in Kingston, and I stayed with them. And they were honestly my first impression of Jamaicans. They were the first people to give me They were the first people I met in Jamaica, and they were the ones that set the tone for the rest of my trip. And obviously it was very positive.
Right.
So very, very friendly couple. There was also another Lebanese couch surfer who was couch surfing there, who I've never met in my whole life. So me and him decided to do the trip together for that week. And yeah, and I started in Kingston and went to Portland. And I don't know, like the minute I took that flight back to the US, I knew that I was going to come back. I just knew I was going to come back. And 4 months later, I was back and it was Kingston again. And what ended up happening is I ended up coming 6 times here.
In the course of what period of time?
Over, I want to say 2 years, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years, 2.5 years. Or actually, hold on, 3 years. And what happened, so I would always come to Kingston and then from Kingston kind of spend a few days somewhere else, but mostly the east side of the island. And obviously, like, as you know, Kingston is small and you get to meet people, like you meet someone and then you meet someone else and then you come back and you've met that person again and then you meet someone else. So I got to meet a lot of people through these trips. And I was also doing a lot of social projects, grassroots projects here. So everything from raising funds for old age homes to helping children with very, very serious medical conditions. At the time, I was using Facebook and crowdfunding as platforms to create awareness around causes that I felt were worth helping out with.
And these were just causes that you came across as you traveled the island.
Yeah, exactly. So like one of them was I went to Trench Town and I really wanted to go past just the culture yard. And I wanted to kind of really explore the community. And that's where I came across the Golden Age home, old age home. And it's a home that houses blind elderly people who are alone. And I think the contrast between what I had been seeing in the US was so stark.
Yep.
And I don't know, I said, like, if I can help, I want to. And then at that time, so Facebook was not what it was now. Facebook was really a platform where you could create positive change around you. And then there's crowdfunding, which was just becoming an emerging trend. So I was using Facebook to raise awareness on things I had seen here. And I was setting up crowd funds in parallel to raise money and to come back and to finish a project that I wanted, that I had seen from before. So I did that for pretty much most of my trips coming back here. So like I said, old age homes, children with very, very particular medical conditions, just like a lot of things here. And then anyways, so I came back 6 times, getting to know people through each trip. And then by the 7th trip, I had quit my job in the US. So my background is in corporate. I was doing global marketing for 15 years between Paris and the US. And I always knew I wanted to open a restaurant. That was a childhood dream of mine. But I ended up in corporate mostly because of, let's call it, cultural pressures. I think this is a reality people don't talk about enough. Like in certain cultures, you're expected to be like a doctor or a lawyer or something serious. Like you can't just say, I want to be in a restaurant. I want to open a restaurant or be a fashion designer. Like your parents might, So I was getting that pressure from my dad, actually. He wanted me to do something serious with my life. And I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I ended up doing a business school and getting into the world of business. So I did that for 15 years. And that was my way to start saving money for that restaurant dream. So every year I just saved money, until the 15 years kind of went through and my soul felt like, okay, this is enough. I can't do this. I can't do more of this anymore. So I quit. I took a year off to travel. I came to Jamaica for 6 months and started a project which still is out around in Kingston called Paint Jamaica, which is a street art project. So I want to say it's probably the first major street art project in Kingston. There's obviously been other projects of that nature out here, but I think at that scale, Paint Jamaica would have been the first one. So that's something I came and I teamed up with a bunch of local artists, and we did that for 6 months. And it just blew up, which I never saw. I never saw that coming up. It just became this huge thing. And then I left and I traveled for another 6 months. I did India, I did Thailand, I did Indonesia. But something, I just felt like, I wanted to come back here. I felt like I wanted to come back here, which is very unusual because I don't go back to a same place more than twice. So for me to come to Jamaica like 7 times is very unusual for me. And anyways, and I decided to give it a try. And anyone I had met during my trips, I sent them my resume. And I told them, if you're looking for anyone in marketing, this is my background and I'm trying to work and live here. Eventually, I ended up getting a job, which I did for 3 years. And then it was time to kind of move on to doing my own thing. So yeah, so that's my story here. It's all very mysterious in a way. I can't say any of it really makes sense. It has a lot to do with like following my heart and my emotions, and just, I think, being so attracted to this place because I felt, I don't know, like I never came here for music. I'm not necessarily a big cannabis smoker. I didn't have a boyfriend here because that's a question I get all the time. Like, she must have had a boyfriend here or something.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any. It was none of those reasons. I just felt drawn here, and I think by nature, I'm someone who wants to create something meaningful in my life and in this world. And I found that Jamaica gave me that space to do so. With people who wanted to really see change.
Okay.
You know, and I think Jamaicans love their country. I think some of them have a complicated relationship with their country, like a love-hate relationship, which I think is common in many countries around the world. But I think ultimately they want to see something good happening here because it is rough out here. I can say that as a business owner, living on my own and running this business like as a sole proprietor, it's rough. It's really, really, really rough. And I can see that people want to see positive changes happening, and I think that's where I fit in. Like, that's something I wanted to do with my life anyway. And I met people who wanted to do that. And it was just like a momentum that just started to happen very, very, very quickly. And I got caught up in that. And I don't have any regrets. Like, until now, I don't have any regrets. Wow. Despite all the ups and downs, and as hard as it can be here, and it can be so frustrating, I have until today not had any regrets. So anyways, that's basically my story. So it's like moving from a corporate life into something much more meaningful, and that really represents my true essence, and doing it here out of all places. So yeah, so it's been so that is my story. But the restaurant has always been a dream of mine. Always, always, always. And but corporate was my way of saving money and also kind of building some business skills that I obviously need in what I'm doing now. So that's something I always tell people, like, if you're stuck in a corporate job and your dream is to do something else after, like, don't try to take advantage of it, because you might learn things that will be useful for you when you do your own thing.
Right, right.
So nothing really goes to waste. Nothing goes to waste. Yeah.
So the restaurant was always the dream. You are inspired and have been inspired by food. From your posts, I can tell that food has played a huge role in your life. And your tagline is "Stay food curious." So how does that really inform your offerings and your creation of this restaurant and everything that goes into what you present in this space?
Hmm. So, with time, food curious kind of, I've always been a curious person by nature, and kind of stay food curious just kind of popped up one day, like very naturally to me.
Mhm.
Um, and I realize, I think on a very deep subconscious level, it is a representation of my childhood, being a Middle Eastern child growing up in Europe, where you can be very easily misunderstood as the
Mm.
Middle East and in Europe. And especially in countries like France, historically, there's been a lot of just kind of, like I would say the Black community and the Arab community are probably looked down upon in France for historic reasons. There's a lot of discrimination towards these two ethnicities. And then obviously after 9/11, everything changed, especially for Arabs around the world. So anyways, I always felt like, I would go to school and I would see my friends with their Western lunches that their mothers had packed. And then I was coming with my hummus sandwich and my za'atar sandwich and the pickles and the dried fruits and the pumpkin seeds. And all these kids would look at me like, what on earth are you eating? So I was always seen as different, not just because I had I had a different skin tone or different hair. Like, again, this is in a European context.
Mhm.
Because I'm very conscious that in Jamaica, I might just look like someone with Indian descent or an uptown brown girl or something. Like,
Mhm.
I'm very aware of that. But that's not my experience. My experience is in Europe. So anyway, so I always realized that food was something where I was always going to be seen as a different person because of the food that I ate.
Ah, mhm.
And it's something that upset me for so many years, that people were not tolerant towards something different. And why do we all have to eat the same thing? Like, why do we all have to eat things that are of a Western influence? And I'm not saying a Western influence is bad, but why is it so much more louder than anything else?
Mhm. Mhm.
And why are we so like caught up on just like 10 ingredients when there's like 50,000 other ones that you can eat? So that's something that always, I think, on a subconscious level was confusing for me. And I decided to, instead of giving in, I had two choices really. One was to give in and kind of give up my identity and say, I'm just going to become like everyone else. And the other was to honor where my parents come from and stick to that. Because my parents at home, no matter what, like still ate their own foods.
Mm.
And they listened to their own music and they watched their TV shows. And there was always a sense of nostalgia that they had at home, which is, we can't go back to our homes. It's not ideal, but we're still very nostalgic about many things. And they made sure that my brother and I stayed connected to their culture. Something I'm very grateful for, because a lot of first generation kids, I think, lose that. They just assimilate, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's the spirit of food curious, that if we're curious, it can become a beautiful thing and it can bring people together and we can appreciate our differences instead of fearing them. And I've just always believed that food is probably the best tool to do that. Like, food is the best tool to do that. And I think humans by nature, they travel because they want to try new foods. I mean, even for like much darker reasons, even in times of colonialism,
Mm.
which, came with a lot of pain and a lot of wiping out of culture and everything. But there was a lot of food curiosity through colonialism as well. The unfortunate thing is it wasn't done in a proper way. It left a lot of people kind of, it only benefited certain people, but it was a form of, like, humans by nature travel and want to try new things. So anyways, it's something I really believe in, but I just think that we can use it for the better good and just realize, like, food can be exciting. You can eat something different every day and it never gets boring. and it just never gets boring, and it'll bring people together, and you can mentally stay stimulated all the time. There's something very cerebral and mental about food. You know, like I'm always reading, like I'm a crazy researcher. I'm always reading. People don't realize that comes with a job. I'm always reading. Like in the mornings, I'm reading. At night, I'm reading. On my time off, I'm reading. So anything I buy, I'm reading about it. Anything I eat, I'm reading about it. So there's something very cerebral about food, and it can only happen when you're food curious.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is. It's a merger of my personal lived experience of why can't we accept people for their differences, and then just, I guess, you know, the nature of humans, that we are actually very food curious by nature. And then I did so much traveling as well. I did a lot of solo traveling, and obviously travel is like the best school for food.
Right.
Travel is the best way to learn about food. And yeah, and I just wanted to share that, like, in the most authentic way ever, in the most authentic and accessible and exciting way ever, because I make sure I keep my menu accessible for most people.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean to you, accessibility in terms of the menu?
So accessible means that obviously in a Jamaican context, so much is imported.
Mm.
And I think sometimes we're so quick to buy the overpriced imported ingredients, because obviously those are the ones that are written about in the media more than others, because most of the media is in the English language.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever like the US writes about is generally what the world tends to be influenced by. So, you know, if kale is the thing in the US, that's it. Kale is the thing all over the world.
Right.
If quinoa is the thing in the US, avocado, all of that. So what I wanted to show is that you can use local ingredients, like everyday affordable local ingredients like cabbage and pumpkin and beetroot and all these things, but make them so exciting. You know, and I think cabbage is kind of my fetish ingredient here. So everything, cabbage is in like salad. We make vegan fried chicken with cabbage. We've made escabeche fish with cabbage. We pickle it, we sauerkraut it, we roast it. We've done like everything with cabbage, which is generally, obviously during a drought, it's a little less affordable.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, like cabbage and callaloo and pumpkin are generally like fairly accessible ingredients over the year. Anyway, so that's, for me, it's important that food does not divide people, because that's what it's doing right now. You know, you have like, I think especially in Jamaica, like I think in some countries, you have your fine dining restaurants, you have fast food, but then you also have that middle market, fast casual segment,
Mm-hmm.
which is affordable for most. And I think in Jamaica that's developing now, but generally it's been either fine dining that only some people can, or, you know, like a certain price point that only some people can afford,
Mm-hmm.
and then the cook shop and fast food, which another segment can afford.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's nothing that's been in the middle. At least that's how I see it. And then when it comes to vegan food, a lot of it tends to be expensive. I mean, everyone has their own reasons, and I respect that. And then there's been the ITAL cook shops, who I think are central to, I mean, just so much of vegetarian, vegan food in Jamaica in general. And I think they've truly made it accessible for the masses. But it's just important. Like, food can be a social divider,
Mm-hmm.
which affects our knowledge about food. It affects our health, because if you can't access healthy food, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to make it accessible. Food should not be a social divider in my books. But I fully respect, not to get anything confused, like I fully respect the Michelin star restaurants and gastronomy. I fully respect that, and I think they have a role to play in just how food evolves and everything. But it can't be just that or the other extreme.
Right.
There always has to be a lot happening in the middle also.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a lot happening in the middle, especially when it comes to vegan food. or more vegetables. Let's just say more a veggie-centric diet. So anyways, and again, I think that ties back to probably my childhood of, my parents come from very humble backgrounds. But let's just say I've been exposed to different social classes. So I'm one of those kids that I've seen both sides of the spectrum, and I've gone between both. And I've always wondered, like, why is there a wall between both social classes? Why can't we meet in the middle?
Right.
And that's probably the hardest thing to do. It's easy to just stay in your camp, but it's much harder to meet in the middle. So I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
It does. And it segues quite nicely into my next question, which is your concept of the kitchen, right? Communal, safe, creative space. I think you touched on that in your previous response. Can you speak a little bit more to how you've created your space to do just those things, what you described?
So I've always, so I guess again, I'm going to keep referring to my childhood because that's where a lot of the inspiration and the authenticity starts. And it's what I know best also. So I'm only going to do what I know best. So for us, the kitchen was always like, we didn't really hang out in the living room a lot. The living room was like, there's plastic wraps on the couches, and no one went there unless special guests came.
Right.
You couldn't be caught there. Like, anyway, so, and I know a lot of people can relate to that. So we didn't hang out in the living room. We actually hung out in the kitchen a lot, and everything happened there. And I had a grandma who she was up before anyone else, and she would just go and she would make her coffee and she would start prepping lunch for the day. And she has a big family, and we're talking about like 8 kids and then all their grandchildren and then the eventual neighbors that were going to pop in. So she needed help. Nothing was done alone. Everything was communal in my family. So there's no such thing in my family as preparing a meal on your own. There's always someone who's going to help you out. And it's usually a very lengthy process, and you sit there and someone is peeling the onions, someone is sorting the string beans, and we're all having a cup of coffee or tea while we're doing it. And it's a real social connector. So it's not seen as like a hassle that we have to cook. It's seen as an opportunity for us to spend time together over food, to prepare a meal that others can now partake in. So I was raised that way. My mother raised me that way. So she never cooked a meal by herself. My brother and I were always there to help. Always. I mean, unless we were at school or something, but it's rare. It's rare for my mother to really do everything on her own when it came to cooking. And we didn't have a helper at home. So we were her helpers in a way. And when that starts from a young age, you obviously learn about food from a very young age that way. And it comes very organically. So anyway, so that's all I know, really. That's really all I know on the most intimate level. And I think in Middle Eastern culture, especially, it's so common to be walking around in the bakeries. Like, there's no wall that separates the bakery. There's no wall between food establishments and the street in the Middle East. So you're walking and everything is open, and you're seeing through everyone's kitchen. You're seeing the bakery, you're seeing the shawarma, you're seeing the falafel, you're seeing everything. Everything, it's like a live cooking show while you're walking through the streets. You're smelling the coffee being grinded. It's so vivid when it comes to food. So vivid and vibrant. And people are handing you food through the windows. It's very common in my culture that you're passing past a pastry shop and the owner is just handing you out a pastry to try.
Right.
So we do it I think we're very generous, we're very loving, we're very open. And that's something I'm very proud of in my culture. And that's all I know on the most intimate level. And I think I saw that through some of my trips in the region, like in the Middle East and in parts of Asia as well. And I see that in Mexico as well a lot. Like in Mexico, I see that a lot. And that's all I know. And it's what I love the most. And I always kind of I found it interesting that you go to a restaurant and you never see who's cooking your meal.
Mm.
Like you never see the kitchen. It's like this mysterious thing behind a door. You have no idea who's cooking your meal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to criticize staff or to have unrealistic expectations because you're so detached from the process. You know, like I think the idea of the customer is always right is completely delusional, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're not always right. I think that you obviously, you know, you're in a customer oriented business, but to say they're always right is delusional when they are completely out of touch with what it takes to prepare your food.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted people to see what we're doing. And I wanted them to smell everything. And I wanted like I just wanted it to be one space where everything is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that comes the idea of a safe space, because I find sometimes, and as a woman who traveled a lot on her own, I had to eat out on my own, obviously. And I always looked out for those places where, okay, do I think I could be comfortable here without being annoyed by someone or harassed or something? So that was always something very important for me. And just a place where no one is like rude and everyone's friendly, because you can't eat peacefully if you're not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. So that's food has to be like there has to be love that's felt, and you can only do that through the design of the space, through the staff that you hire, through the energy of the guests themselves. And I think that's what I've grown to see happening here for the last 2.5 years. And I'm obviously very, very grateful for it. Like I always say, it's only become the space it is because of my team, because of the guests. The guests that we get are totally like aligned with the energy here. And that's the only reason it has become the space that it is. And I mean, obviously I've played a role in designing it, but then when it becomes a reality, you're dealing with so many humans, you know, so the humans have to make it work also.
Right.
Yeah. So that's basically it.
So to create what you just described, you talked a little bit about your role. You must have at some point, because of just how vivid your space is, how colorful, creative, and the depth of the concepts of your recipes and the food that you're presenting to guests, this is coming from you, right? This is your offering.
Yeah.
And so what's your process around that? I mean, as you're developing these things, how do things come to you? You say you're researching and you're reading and so on, but what is your creative process like?
So I'm gonna go back to like family.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is how my grandma cooked. This is how my mother cooked. My mom was very, very, very good. And my grandma, all of them, they were very good at finding multiple ways to use one ingredient and not letting anything go to waste. And I think that's the essence of a lot of cuisines around the world. I think even in Jamaica, you have that a lot, where nothing goes to waste and we can be very resourceful with food and all of that. So a lot of it is just kind of unconscious, like a repertoire of cooking that has over time built in my head from my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
The other comes from travel, and seeing things around me, and then subconsciously that leaves a little repertoire of ideas in your head. So you'll see an ingredient and you're like, oh, like I've seen this being done somewhere else, and how can I do it in a different way here? Because I've seen it before. You've been exposed to so much. So I think what travel does is it exposes you to so many possibilities. So your mind is always open to different ways of doing things. And then the other is our guests. Sometimes they ask me questions like, hey, have you ever thought of doing this? we really liked that last time. Can you do it again? Sometimes they'll like, I remember once I made something and they told me, Marianna, this kind of reminds me of fish. And I found I'll pay attention to those details.
Yeah.
And I'll ask them, like, what is it that's reminding you of fish exactly? And I'll probe and probe and probe and probe, and then work on that. Like, it'll simmer in my mind for many weeks. And I'm like, something in that dish reminded someone of fish. And how can I now turn that into a vegan escovitch? You know what I mean? So I'm always, and then the reading that I'm doing is more, I think, historical information and like the origins of ingredients and, the role they've played in different cultures. So let's just say it's a lifetime of reading and just building a mental library in your head. It's really like, and you're always going to be a student. You're always going to be a student in this career. You're always learning. Like, it does not stop, and that's something I find wonderful about it. And you will always be a student if you're going to cook as for a living. So you never stop learning. Never stop learning. And then the last important point is obviously seasonality. Yeah. So we work with a lot of farmers, and then sometimes we just can't get certain things because there's a drought or there's heavy rainfalls or the price is too out of reach for us. So we have to cut back for a while and then come back to it when it's in season again. So that's obviously a big factor, especially in Jamaica.
Yeah, the flexibility you're describing is, to be able to pivot and rethink and to utilize what's available, that must be just incredible. It's not even like you can plan. You just have to be able to do that on the fly.
It's intuitive. And then sometimes like I know what my menu is, and I'll walk in the morning and then I'll see something. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot we had this. And it would be so cool to use it on here today. So sometimes it's also that, like, my team know that very well. Like, I'm cooking and then I've changed the thing like maybe 3 times during the process, and they see that happening often with me. So you just have to keep a very open mind and just keep it open, and so much fun stuff can come out of it. It just doesn't get boring that way.
So you've touched on the ingredients and seasonality as you spoke about. How does that impact basically what you're offering? How do you go to the market? Do you know what's available? Do you have some farmers that are, or producers that are providing you with things on a regular basis, things that you can build up from? How does that work?
So we work with a few different farmers. So they actually deliver to us. So I'm usually placing an order, they come and they deliver to us. They're each different. So some farmers only grow like 3 things, and I know that they're good at these 3 things and I take it. Some farmers are super seasonal and they'll tell me, hey, Marianna, I have like red okra today, or I have sweet potato this month. And I know I have to take it because I'm not going to see it again for another 10 months. And then we have a farmer who is like a general farmer and can source pretty much anything for us. Or let's say the Jamaican staples, he'll source it for us. And then I also get approached by a lot of people who just come walk to the kitchen and tell us they're growing something and would you be interested? And it's usually the things that I think the general public don't want. But I think through word of mouth, they may have found out that I'm a spot that's willing to take a lot of the weird things. So that's how I work around it. It's kind of whatever comes my way, whatever fits the budget. And if there's someone who has something exceptional and that I'm really, really looking for, I grab that one and I just, and that's the highlight of the week is we got this ingredient in our hands. And and I like to share the stories about how different things end up here and where they're coming from. And so it's very, it's availability and budget, because I'm still running a business at the end of the day. So availability and budget and seasonality, basically.
And so you're not like going down to Coronation Market and picking stuff up.
No, I used to do that before the kitchen. I used to go every weekend, and I love Coronation Market. But then when we opened my first 6 months, I was obviously, it's the first 6 months are like, you're so busy just trying to figure things out. And then the pandemic happened.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic changed everything. I mean, social distancing, and then I had to really be present here because there was all these new things we never had to do before, like wear a mask and sanitize, and only 10 people allowed at a time, and all of this. So I had to be present. Like I couldn't afford to really step out much.
Right.
I mean, the only other places I'll go to I go to Price Marts to get some things in bulk. And then I go to a lot of different ethnic food shops for specific spices or seeds or grains or something like that. But so that I do a lot of that. But in terms of fresh produce, it comes to us from the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And these spices that you're getting from the ethnic food mart, so they're not typical ingredients. So you find that there is availability of these ingredients.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of looking around.
Mm.
Like it's literally something I do every weekend. I'm just going from one place to another to see what I can find.
Uh-huh.
And then sometimes it's also the suppliers you work with will tell you, hey, we now have this.
Okay.
And then I always ask them, how can you have this now? And it's through the ethnic communities. Like they want a certain ingredient and they make it work through their community,
Mm-hmm.
and they bring it in.
Oh,
and then there's
okay.
things, and then there's things I also order online. There's things that I order online also, but that's not much.
Mm-hmm.
That's not much. But a lot of things is just doing a lot of just going out there and trying your luck, going from one shop to another, to another, to another, to another. And then sometimes the information comes to you. So it's just it's just always just discovery and exploring and staying curious and open, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how would you describe then your customer?
So my customer is very diverse. We get different profiles here. We get very different backgrounds, which I love, and was always what I wanted to see happen. Actually, I always wanted this space to be a place where people of all different backgrounds would come.
Mm-hmm.
We get everything from like young entrepreneurs, we get creatives, we get high profile executives, we get politicians sometimes, we get yoga people, we get people who have never tried vegan food before but are getting into it. We get young, we get old. I mean, whatever old is, but we get like a big age range. We get different social backgrounds. Honestly, we get students. Like it's so diverse, but maybe one point in common they all have is that they're very open-minded, because I think you have to be open-minded to eat here. They're very open-minded. A lot of them are somewhat well-traveled or very well-traveled, or who have lived abroad. Not all of them, a lot of them haven't. And they're just generally creative, like free spirits, entrepreneurs, and it's just very, like, I think, accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's like a big hodgepodge of very different people who eat here. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And
if you had like to do an elevator pitch, of what type of food you offer, what would that be?
So it's I mean, vegan goes without saying. But it's just a surprise each day, like something different each day, and just let yourself be surprised. Like half of the people who come in here never read the menu. So half of them are religiously following the menu on Instagram. And then half of them come here and they never read the menu. It's just whatever you've cooked today is what we'll take.
Oh, wow.
So it's food curious.
Yeah.
It's a food curious menu. And it's simple, because, we only offer one plate every day, and that's it. So there's no choices really. It's what it is, and that's it. Yeah. So,
what are your thoughts on the Jamaican food scene?
Well, I don't want to say, like, I'm careful with my opinion because I wasn't born and raised here. But I think in the 6 years that I've been here, I'm seeing a lot of change, very, very, very happening very quickly. Like, it's incredible how it's happening so quickly. And I'm seeing it, whether it's the options that restaurants are offering. I'm seeing it through the wave of young caterers. A lot of them are doing it online or from their home. I'm seeing it in the offerings that you can find at supermarkets now, like new vegetables and fresh herbs and everything that are showing up. So there's obviously a lot of change happening very, very, very quickly, which is a great thing. But I mean, I think I'm not going to compare it with like a New York or London or Paris because it's still in its very early stages. But there's a lot of potential, obviously. I actually don't eat out much, funny enough. I cook more than I eat out. And if I do eat out, it's usually ITAL cook shops.
Yeah.
Or it's Indian restaurants. I don't know,
Oh.
like I just really love those two things. But I actually really don't eat out much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't eat out much at all. Like I eat out more when I'm traveling than in the country that I live in. And I've always said this, I prefer to cook in Jamaica than to eat out in Jamaica.
That's
Because
a
I
really
think,
cool distinction.
yeah, because I think the range of ingredients you have available to you here outweighs the options, the restaurant options you have for now.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're really going to go past like the yam and the green banana and the plantain and the pumpkin and all of that, the truth is you have so many ingredients to work with here.
Right.
And it's like the ratio of ingredients to restaurants, in my opinion, I don't know. I mean, that's just a personal opinion. I could very well be wrong, but it's just my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But it's changing. And then I'm also seeing, especially since the pandemic, I'm seeing a huge shift towards healthier eating. Like that has been very obvious. I mean, we get so many customers who come in and they've never, like, they just radically decided one night to take their health into their own hands. And they come in and they're like, I've been doing raw vegan. They usually start with raw vegan.
Mm-hmm.
And they go hardcore raw vegan for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks. And they never want to go back to their previous lifestyle. Mm-hmm. They feel so good like after that period. So they're ready to transition into cooked vegan, and they usually end up here, and I'm sure they're ending up in other places also, but they just never want to go back to their previous lifestyle. I've seen a lot of that in the last year, especially. So I know the pandemic has maybe encouraged people to take control of their health more than before. Yeah.
That's
so
really
I'm seeing
cool.
that trend. Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so we're going to transition a little bit to some of these things that are personal to you, right? So if you had an opportunity, like an all expense paid trip to any restaurant in the world, where would you go?
I don't have a restaurant name, but there are culinary scenes that I can't say a name, but let's say, because I don't think in like specific, I think more about culinary scenes that I find very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think Mexico has a very interesting culinary scene in the last 10 years. Because what's happening in Mexico, I mean, Mexico has a big street food culture, obviously, but it's having a growing fine dining culture, which is very new. And that's really because so many Mexicans have worked in the US for some of the best restaurants, usually as like secondary jobs. Like they're not doing the most exciting thing in the restaurant, but they've learned so much. And they're bringing that information back to Mexico to build a restaurant scene there. And that's why you're seeing all these like this incredible innovation happening in Mexico right now. So Mexico, while I've been before, I feel like there's just so much eating to do there.
Yeah.
I think Spain has a fascinating contemporary cuisine. Very, very fascinating. And it's very unconventional and out of the box and very out of the box. I would love to try Japan. I've never been to Japan, but I would love to try the whole food experience there.
Yeah.
So I would say like these 3 places. I've been to Spain and to Mexico, but I haven't been to Japan. but I find these three places to be very interesting right now in food.
Yeah.
I mean, Japan has always been interesting in food, but I think Spain and Mexico are very, very, and I would love to go to Trinidad also for food.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of people go there for carnival, but I always said, if I go there, it's for a food trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trinidad for food, like that's definitely, hopefully a thing for me in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Mexico as, there's so many different, I've only been once and I went to Mexico City, but I also wanted on that trip to go to Oaxaca.
Yeah, which has like a lot of just the ancient kind of Aztec Mayan cuisine that you see there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a very vibrant scene in Oaxaca. Yeah.
So, so yeah, I would totally agree with all of those places. Korea too is
yes, also
like a big, and I don't know, here we're having a lot of, at least a lot of presence of Korean cuisine and people experimenting some with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So can you share with us something that you are also inspired a lot by music, judging from the sound box behind you on the wall there? You have music in the kitchen. What are you currently listening to or reading?
Listening to it changes all the time. So it can be anything from like Miles Davis to like Cheb Khaled, who's an Algerian singer, to João Gilberto, or to Drake. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Drake, but I think some of his stuff can be really good. So, or Lauryn Hill or Jamiroquai or whatever. So it's always changing. It's more kind of like the mood that I'm in. Reading, I'm actually not really a book reader. I'm more of like an articles or research paper reader. So I can't quite say, like, I'm just always reading about food. Like recently I've been reading a lot about Berber cuisine, which is kind of the original, like the ethnic tribes of North Africa.
Oh yeah.
So from like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, the people who lived mostly in the desert and had to survive by cooking, like in the Sahara, basically. So that's very fascinating. Like, I absolutely love reading about these indigenous cultures, like Aztec cooking and Mayan cooking, and that's something really fascinating because you realize they were very intelligent in how they cooked, and it had to do with like health, it had to do with sustainability, it had to do with respect to the environment, it had to do with social cohesion. Like, men have a role, women have a role, children have a role. So it was very holistic, the way people cooked back then. And I always read that. I love reading about that because it also inspires me in how I can cook and what I can learn from that. And it also makes for great stories to share. So yeah, I think Berber cuisine has been a big thing on my radar recently. And generally it tends to be like that. It's like I start with a topic and I just go down a rabbit hole that never ends until I'm done with it, and then it's the next topic. So yeah.
What fact about yourself most surprises others when they learn it?
I honestly, I don't know how people see me from the outside. So I'm not really sure what idea they have in their head exactly. I think some people might think I'm very, I don't know, maybe some people think I'm like naive and sweet, and maybe some people think I'm stuck up and, affluent, which I'm not. I'm neither of those things. Some people think I'm very strong and I can always figure things out by myself, but they don't realize I'm super emotional. I'm super sensitive. Like, I have emotions and feelings and I get hurt and I cry just like everyone else. But I'm not sure if I give that impression. I think people see me as like a very strong woman and resilient, but gosh, like I cry more than anyone else. That's just a fact. I'm super emotional. I'm very laid back, like outside of work, because I think most people see me in a work context. But outside of work, I'm super, super, super laid back, and I can be very fun to be around. But it takes time for me to open up. It takes, like, I'm very approachable and very friendly, but it will take a long time for me to really open up to you and for you to see like my more goofy sides, less serious sides.
Right.
I think
Right.
people think I'm always a serious person,
Uh-huh.
which I'm not. But it takes time. It takes time for people to see that.
Right.
Yeah, it really takes time for people to see those sides to me. Yeah.
So when you're not in the kitchen and not reading,
Mhm.
researching, what are you doing?
Well, now during the pandemic, it's obviously a bit more challenging, but let's say before, in usual circumstances, I mean, travel whenever I get the chance, I try to travel. Here in Jamaica, spending time in nature, I mean, that's the ideal, like beaches, and I'm a big beach person and I'm a big swimmer.
Okay.
So I swim like every week, if I can, several times a week. Swimming is a big, outside of the kitchen, like swimming is my other big happy thing
Mm-hmm.
in my life. So a lot of time in nature, you know, again, before the pandemic, just a lot of very spontaneous things with friends, like meeting up, cooking dinners, getting together, discussing creative ideas. Like I love discussing that's something I realize I connect with a lot of people who are creatives, I think.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things is like just getting a drink and just discussing like all the crazy things we can do in this world. That's very satisfying for me. Yeah, and then like another thing I used to do is sometimes just drive out in Jamaica, just drive out and then kind of find something really interesting and then a whole story opens up. You know, it could be like a Irish moss vendor that I bump into in St. Thomas. It could be a spice vendor in Coronation Market. And what I end up doing is kind of building a connection with them and then coming back and building a relationship with them. And there's a whole story that has now unfolded that
Right.
I now want to share. So just a lot of like, I think I'm a very like random, spontaneous person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very open, I'm very random, I'm very spontaneous. And I think more than anything else, I just like human connection. I like culture, I like stories, I like getting people's stories. And I'm just as comfortable like in a dress at a very nice hotel as I am on the streets downtown. Like
Right.
I'm very flexible, and I think that's something people don't know about me. Is just I'm very chameleon like. I'm very adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very. And I'm pretty sure that's something people do not know about me. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So to finish up, I'd like to ask you, so there are things that I term as my non-negotiables, things that I need to do, that I recognize that I need to do in order to maintain um, some amount of groundedness and peace and joy. What are those things for you?
So for me, it's I'm very disciplined with how I start my day and how I end my day.
Hmm.
Because I know that everything that's going to happen in between is going to be like it could be organized chaos, everything that happens in between.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very strict with my morning and my nighttime, what I do in those things. So like morning, I've never been one to go and jump on my phone first thing. And it's been for years, I've always been like that. I've always kind of set a curfew on my phone that the first hour in the morning, you're not on your phone. You know, you get up, you do what you have to do, like if it's meditation, if it's moving your body, if it's taking a shower, if it's journaling, whatever it is you need to do, you need to do that.
Right.
Because that's very important to set the tone for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you have to make sure you make time for that also. Because if you're just waking up and you're rolling out of bed and going into the day, like, I don't know, I don't think that for me, that's not ideal. And I learned that the hard way. You know, I learned that through pain and everything. And then nighttime, like people always say sleep is overrated. I've never subscribed by that. Sleep is very important. It's very, very important. And I also have a very strict rule at night, which is there's no phone around me.
Mm.
Like ideally 2 hours before I fall asleep. So like after there's like a cutoff time for my phone. Even though I share so much on social media, I'm actually like there's very clear cutoff times on my phone.
Oh.
So yeah, so after like, I don't know, after a certain time, that's it. There's no more phone. It's somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm very, like, and I'm just focusing on something very peaceful. I have incense, I've showered. I'm very grateful for the day. Sometimes I journal at night as well. And I'm repeating a lot of positive affirmations also. That's something like at night, in the morning, sometimes at night I'm falling asleep to videos that are repeating like positive affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also a big believer that whatever you're going to fall asleep on might be something you're going to wake up to.
Mm.
So it's like a continued kind of stream that's going on. So those are non-negotiables for me. Morning, like how I start and how I end. Physical movement is a non-negotiable. Sometimes I can't do it as much as I want to, but I'm never hard on myself. But getting some physical activity in is a non-negotiable for me. Healthy eating is a non-negotiable. I don't think you need to be perfect. I'm not a subscriber of perfect. Like, I'm not a subscriber of that. I think you can be 80% good and 20%, indulging in what you want to indulge in. But you have to keep a minimum that's working for you, not against you.
Right.
And then the older you get, like I'm 38 now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can feel my body changing over the years. So when I was like 25, I could eat cake at night, and in the morning I didn't see it in my stomach anymore.
Right.
But that's not the case anymore now. Like if
No,
I
it's
eat
not.
if I eat heavy at night, like first of all, it's gonna interrupt my whole sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So I've lost out on all my sleep because my stomach, I'm digesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see it the next morning, I feel it. So age, you also have to kind of work with the age that you're, and you learn. I think the older you get, you really learn how to take care of your body. And it doesn't feel like a punishment that you're taking care of your body. It just helps you get through the next day better.
Right.
So yes, it's those things, and I'm very spiritual. I grew up, in a Christian family, but I'm not religious. But I'm very spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very spiritual, and I think you have to keep, especially in these times, some level of spirituality in these times. I think you have to have some spiritual resilience in this time. Whatever it is you choose to believe in, you have to have a lot of faith right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then so those would be my non-negotiables. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. And thank you for sharing this time with me. I know that there's a lot going on for you right now, and I really, really appreciate the time you've literally taken out of your day to do this. So thank you. Much gratitude.
No problem. Thank you. And like, keep up. Like, I really love everything you're doing. And,
Thanks.
you're giving a platform for so many creatives. And I've watched some of the other interviews you've done. So like, I appreciate that. I'm saying thank you, but I'm also saying thank you on behalf of the other solo creatives who are trying to just, create more beauty around them through what they do.
Yes. And that's
I
exactly.
really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to elevate, because there's so much that we can be, sad about or complain about, but there is a lot more beauty.
Yeah. And in times like this, you have to put even more beauty out there.
Yes.
Like times like this, people need a lot of beautiful things in their life right now. So if you can make something beautiful right now, like, please do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how I think it's the best way to deal with these times right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lovely way to end. Thank you, Marianna.
No, thank you.